never forgets what I lost. Wake me up when September ends. Wake me up when September ends. Wake me up when September ends.
Those words of that song were the soundtrack for my life in September 2005. It had just been released over the summer, a single off Green Day's album American Idiot. And I don't remember if I had heard it when it was released in June, but I will never forget how profoundly it hit me when it came on the radio in September. As I drove around the strange, sprawling city of Dallas under blindingly bright sun on unnaturally white pavement, trying to piece together the trappings of a life after mine had been swept away by the floodwaters of Hurricane Katrina in the last days of August. Up to that point, I'd been living in New Orleans, the city that had welcomed me 4 years earlier when I struck out on my own right after high school, fleeing a difficult childhood and the perils of living in Bible Belt Tulsa as a queer kid at the turn of this century. I had moved there with my first love, and when that turbulent relationship ended traumatically, I found my second love in the city herself. Like many queer kids, I had fashioned a family of choice in the gay bars and the streets of the French Quarter, finding aunts and mentors among the elder lesbian activists and siblings among the young drag performers like myself. I had fought hard to make a life for myself, working as a waiter and a bartender through 2 years of school and desperately trying to survive until I could someday learn how to thrive. Now, at 22, I was just surviving. My fight or flight response, already hyperactive from earlier experiences, was in high gear as I drove my mother's hand-me-down 95 Taurus through that foreign landscape, feeling a mix of severe culture shock, depersonalized detachment from my recent trauma, and a fair dose of survivor's guilt. I had escaped before the storm because, unlike many, I had a working vehicle, gas money, and somewhere to go. My body had not been in the floodwaters, but my heart and soul were still caught in their undertow. I had not, like my partner at the time, lost my childhood home and the burial grounds of my ancestors. But the home that had raised me out of adolescence and the hallowed grounds of my soul family were decimated nonetheless. My second-floor apartment was not flooded, but it had lost its roof, and the rainwater had not spared my belongings. In October, I would go back to sift through them and be faced with the overwhelming choice of what to try to salvage. What was truly important? Any of it? None? The clothes and furniture seemed meaningless, but I missed my guitars. I wished I brought my boots. Childhood photos, favorite books, t-shirts from my high school youth rallies, all these things, it turned out, were molded, most beyond repair. You make strange choices about what to throw in a 5x8 trailer when you have 12 hours to get in and out of a city under martial law before you have to turn around and go back to your job in a faraway land. I kept an old pair of sneakers, but left a laptop. I forgot a painting I had made in high school, though I did save most of my art portfolio. Who knew that the thing I would most regret forgetting was a rare cassette tape of my favorite local band that had long since disbanded. When I returned to Dallas with my hodgepodge of half-molded items, I felt panicked at the sight of it all in my previously empty living room of my FEMA-funded apartment. I wanted to throw it all away. It felt to me at once empty and oppressively heavy. I had realized in the weeks before that all the things I had held on to in my life in New Orleans, my friends, my job, my apartment, my stuff, were not enough to anchor me in the face of something so drastic as a hurricane. When I say that when the levees broke, my life was washed away, I don't just mean my material belongings. What I lost, and what I realized I never really had, was my sense of self. I discovered in those first days of September that I had tied my identity to things outside myself that, however valuable, were also transient. I remember like it was yesterday a moment of clarity in the haze of endless phone calls with FEMA and visits to the Red Cross for food and clothing. I was laying on an air mattress in my boyfriend's cousin's one-bedroom apartment, staring at the popcorn ceiling and feeling like I was hurtling through space, as though the rug had literally been yanked out from under me and I was stuck in that moment of zero gravity, suspended in midair. I could see myself in my mind's eye, spinning and spinning as if on an axis. And suddenly I realized there had to be an axis, something that's stable, that anchored me. I had always assumed it was the trappings of a stable life, which I had worked so hard to create. But everything I had worked for was gone. I didn't know who I was, or why I was. All I knew was that I was, and that if I was going to recover and put my life back together, I would need something to hold on to that would not move or change no matter what happened around me. And so I set out to find it in myself. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, renowned psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl explains how he and others made it through their unthinkable trauma, and how he came up with his unique therapeutic approach. His key premise is encapsulated in a quotation from philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche: "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Frankl states that the primary motivational force in human beings is the will to meaning, the striving to find a purpose in one's life. He ranks this above Freud's will to pleasure and Adler's will to power, saying that when a person becomes fixated on hedonistic pleasures like sex or food, or on gaining social status and financial success, it is because their will to meaning is frustrated. They're living in what Frankl calls an existential vacuum, in which their life feels totally meaningless. They don't know who they are or why they are. They have nothing substantial to hold on to, no deeper sense of purpose. So they seek to replace it with sensory indulgences or worldly security. It doesn't work, though. Statistically speaking, rich or famous people are no happier than anyone else. Beyond a certain level of income that provides for all one's basic needs and some breathing room, material wealth has no correlation to emotional well-being. Study after study has confirmed Frankl's theory about the will to meaning, and much of modern-day psychology is based on his concept of logotherapy, an approach that focuses less on the wounds of the past or the neuroses of the present than on the meanings a person may fulfill in the future. The idea is that only in changing one's mindset and future orientation can one resolve those past wounds, overcome the present neuroses, and live a fulfilled and grounded life. Unbeknownst to me, this is exactly what I had set out to do in the post-Katrina years in Dallas, when I realized I needed something to hold on to that transcended external things. Intuitively, I knew that if I was going to come out of this ordeal okay, I was going to have to find something inside myself that was also more than myself. And I would love to stand here and tell you that at the tender age of 22, I had a sudden and total spiritual awakening that pulled back the curtain on the mystery of who I was, why I existed, and how to find meaning and peace in my life. But alas, I am not the Buddha, or Jesus, or any such figurehead of enlightenment. And I bet if you could get a time machine and sit down with any of those people, they'd laugh their heads off if you told them how perfectly they were remembered, and say, "Oh, honey, no. It was a hard road for me, too." And then they might tell you that that was the point, that the road to self-actualization and spiritual awakening was filled with twists and turns and tests of what they'd learned, and that this was indeed the way of making meaning of one's life. At least, I imagine these saviors and gurus might tell you that, because that's been my experience. And as humans, our belief systems tend to reflect our own experiences. And mine is this. In the midst of the literal and figurative storm waters of 2005 and my 2 years in Dallas afterwards, I grasped at many flimsy reeds of misplaced faith before finding a branch stable enough to hold on to, which held me long enough to find another, and eventually, over the course of years, the tree itself, which I will surely continue to climb for the rest of my life. But in the days that first came after Katrina, I put my faith into three things: my 20-year-old equally traumatized boyfriend, my job at Starbucks, which graciously transferred me to a store in Dallas from New Orleans, and the anesthetizing power of alcohol. All of these things failed me, of course. None of them gave me the meaning I sought. In fact, they were the only things I had remaining from my life in New Orleans, which, though rich in social connections and adventure, had been devoid of any sense of deeper purpose or connectedness. I had been looking for both of those, purpose and connectedness, before the storm hit. Looking for love in all the wrong places, as the old song goes. I did not find that first branch from the tree of love until I lost those remnants of my old life. Several months after the storm, my drinking led me to get fired from my job and broken up with by my boyfriend. And as a result, I decided to take a break from alcohol to try to get my head on straight. It would not be my last break with the bottle. That would come a few years later, and continues to this day, thankfully. But it was a beginning. So was the therapy I had started a couple months earlier, having realized I was suffering from PTSD after the storm. The healing I began in those sessions helped me climb into a more autonomous life. And as I moved into an apartment by myself and set an intention to use my time alone to seek some deeper meaning. I started by picking up some books on Eastern traditions, particularly Zen Buddhism. From there, the path unfolded quite serendipitously. It was as though all I had to do was say, yes, I want to find meaning. And the meaning began to show itself wherever I looked, and often where I would never have thought to look. Soon after I started studying Buddhism on my own, I met someone at a transgender support group who was in town for the winter holidays, who happened to be going to the Mahayana Buddhist temple the next day for the local Lama's New Year's address. I went with them and learned about the temple's beginner's meditation class, which I attended the next week. There I learned about the Zen temple just down the highway and signed up for a day-long silent meditation retreat there. I had never been quiet with myself for as long as I was that day. With no distractions, no books, no art or music or writing, or just me and my thoughts. And it was absolutely agonizing for the first few hours. But then the noise in my head, which seemed endless, quieted down. And beneath it, in my heart, was a pain so deep it knocked the wind out of me. I wanted to vomit, to run away, to crawl out of my skin, but all I could do was sit with it. And by the end of the day, for just a fleeting moment, the fog of that pain cleared, and I found beneath it a warm, steady feeling of love and peace. Here was the axis I had seen myself spinning around when the rug had been pulled out from under me over a year earlier. It was within me, and yet it was more than me. This was the mustard seed of faith that over time and with attention and with many starts and stops would begin to move the mountain of pain in my heart and transform it into something meaningful. The sense that there really was a deeper meaning and connection underneath all the pain and suffering in me and in the world would lead me back to the UU tradition that raised me, and then into youth group work. It would help me get sober a few years later, and a few years after that take me into seminary, and a ministry in which I now get to transmute my own painful past into moments of connection and solidarity and hope with people who are suffering in and out of this congregation. The floodwaters of Katrina gave way to fertile soil in my life, in my fellow survivors' lives, and in the city that care forgot. None of these are the same as before the tragedy, but the tree of love grows out of the darkest of places. I do not believe that everything happens for a reason. To say that would be to say that it was all part of a divine plan when 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust, or when 1,833 people died and thousands of others lost their homes in Katrina, or when Houston is currently languishing under trillions of gallons of stormwater, and millions of South Texans are feeling the rug pulled out from under them now, as I did 12 years ago. There can be no reason for such tragedies. And if you are currently in the middle of one, if you have lost a loved one, if you are battling cancer, if your life seems to be coming apart at the seams, and especially if you are watching on the live stream from one of the hurricane-affected areas, I know there's little I can tell you that will make your pain right now seem worthwhile. But I can tell you that out of these storms and within ourselves, we can, in time, find meaning for our lives beyond the loss and grief. We can turn the pain into purpose, find what Viktor Frankl called the meaning of suffering, in which our worst tragedies become our greatest tools because they allow us to help others in their moments of need. One of our members here at the church, who lived through lymphoma, started a group to help cancer survivors live beyond their diagnoses. Another started a local chapter of a support group for families of people living with mental illness after her own son was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia. We have parents whose children have died who consider themselves on call for others experiencing a similar loss. Alcoholics Anonymous, Al-Anon, and other recovery programs were founded by one sober person talking to another who sought sobriety, and have grown into hundreds of thousands of groups with millions of recovered members all around the world. A key piece of AA literature says that our dark past will become our greatest asset. Our worst suffering fuels us to make beautiful art and music, leads us to seek healing in ourselves and in the world, and brings us closer to whatever it is we sense that connects us to one another and to all of creation. Not only can we find meaning in suffering, we must. There is something to hold on to, even in the worst of times. May you find it in yourself, and may you take it beyond yourself, and may you know that your life is and always will be a blessing. Amen.
Texas are upon the eyes of Texas are upon us. We must not turn away. We feel their pain and desperation. Let us respond in love.
Hey, we're so happy you're visiting with us online today. We love connecting with people all across the country and around the world, sharing our powerful message of love beyond belief.
There's something new happening here. You can now join All Souls as a virtual member. Our virtual membership is designed for friends who live outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and who want to engage with All Souls in a meaningful way.
You can be part of an expanding family, a global family really, wherever you are. If you live in Oklahoma,
Ohio,
or Orange County, California,
Canada,
or Cameroon. By becoming a virtual member, you'll be able to deepen your connections with members and friends here in Tulsa and with members wherever you are.
Each week, you'll receive special All Souls content tailored for you, our virtual members. Virtual members have access to pastoral care, to personal prayers, and also receive invitations to exclusive web events.
You can learn more, and if you're ready, you can become a virtual member today by visiting allsoulschurch.org/virtual membership.
We're grateful our ministries are having a positive impact on your life, and we want to share the good news of love beyond belief with more and more people. So no matter what, we need your support to keep this ministry growing and thriving, so please consider making a gift today. You can do so by texting
LOVEBB for Love Beyond Belief to 73256, or simply visit our website. You are a blessing in our lives. May you be blessed
and be a blessing.